Ret Paladins have finally received a buff. They're currently the worst performing class in the game by far. And even though Blizzard said in a previous post that they were not going to be tuning this class, as a lot of people were complaining about the class kind of underperforming, they did mention that the other two specs, Holy and Prot, were absolutely S tier specs, but Ret Paladin is probably the lowest in any sort of tier list right now in Wrath of the Lich King. Well, today news just came out before the weekend that Retribution Paladins will indeed be getting a buff. Actually, technically, two buffs, and what those are that there's going to be a new major glyph in the game called Glyph of Reckoning, and this will make it so that your Hand of Reckoning, your taunt ability, will no longer taunt. Essentially, it was useful as a DPS cooldown whenever you could use it to taunt something as an extra ability, fill in the gaps of your rotation, and it actually did damage when it was taunting something. But there was two issues with it. If the target was untauntable, it wouldn't do any damage, and if the target was tauntable, it would just have a boss turn around and one-shot you. Well, now this glyph will make Hand of Reckoning actually be inside of your DPS rotation, so it spices up the rotation a little bit. And the second buff that we're getting is that Holy Vengeance and Blood Corruption, the dot effects from Seal of Vengeance and Seal of Corruption, will actually now be applied by Divine Storm and Crusader Strike, instead of just normal hits. This is really nice for smoothing out how the class plays. Now, it's important to note that the buffs coming to Retribution Paladins are more so to bring them in line with the lower or middle lower tier DPS classes in this phase. In particular, Blizzard uses the example of Fury Warriors, where Fury Warriors are still at the lower DPS for most fights unless they're playing extremely well, but Ret Paladins aren't going to see this buff boosting them to the top of the DPS meters. You're not going to be a competitive DPS class. It's more of smoothing out the actual class and making it so that you're not so far below everyone else that it kind of hurts you more to bring a Ret Paladin than to bring any other spec Paladin and have it be a buff bot. Now, Blizzard is buffing the class with 4 major goals in line: to give Ret Paladins a slight bump in DPS to again make them on par with Fury Warriors right now. The second major goal was to make sure that there was minimum impact to PvP, or almost zero impact to PvP. And Hand of Reckoning doesn't deal damage in PvP anyways, so this won't have a change with the new glyph. The next goal is obviously to smooth out the gameplay, because there was a little bit of awkwardness in your rotation, especially when changing targets with Vengeance and Corruption dot effects whenever there was downtime. So having that second change does make things a lot more smooth, and they also didn't want to make any major mechanical changes to the Retribution class. So it doesn't really change too much about the Ret Pally class itself, although it does add one more button you need to be pressing to add it to your rotation. It just makes things a little bit more smooth. It will increase your DPS on single target and multi-target situations, and it does make Ret Paladins a little bit more viable. I think this is a really nice change for Rets because of the place they were in before. The class was pretty much busted in a negative way, and now it will bring them up to being a lot more useful, and I think Rets should be really excited right now. But there's one major point that I do want to mention, and that's that Blizzard is not at all making it a goal to make any ongoing class balance changes throughout Wrath Classic. This is essentially the last thing they're planning on changing in Wrath Classic. They don't want to open the floodgates and say, now if you see flaws with your class or it's not performing well, maybe we'll change it. That's not what's going on here. It was just that this class was absolutely down bad, and Blizzard saw kind of a necessity to bump it up slightly. If things are completely out of whack or way too overpowered or underpowered, I would anticipate Blizzard obviously taking a look at them now. And I think this is a good thing for the game itself. So guys, let me know what you think about these changes in the comments. Let me know if you think they maybe should be looking at some of the other classes, but I wouldn't anticipate they'll make any other changes, at least this phase. And lastly, I am doing some raid leading over on Patreon and in Discord calls over this weekend. So if your guild needs help with downing any of the hard mode bosses, definitely let me know over on Patreon, which is in the description, or join the channel memberships if you want to support the channel. I'll see you guys all on the next one, and good luck out there.